Hi everyone, welcome to Business in the Communities, Northern Ireland Environmental Benchmarking Survey Gap Analysis Masterclass. I'm Catherine Campbell, I'm an Environmental Programme Manager at Business in the Community and I manage the survey. I'm joined here today with my colleagues Keelan and Hannah in the background. If you have any questions as we go along, please use the chat function and my colleagues will answer these throughout the webinar. And we will pick up any unanswered questions at the end. We have a wee Q&A session at the end. You can also email these into us at environment@bitcni.org.uk and we'll answer your questions after the webinar. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment just to express our thanks to DERA for their continued support of the Northern Ireland Environmental Benchmarking Survey, and a special thank you to Coca-Cola as well, our survey sponsors whose support makes this possible. So before we get into the actual gap analysis, just a quick bit of context on the Northern Ireland Environmental Benchmarking Survey. So the survey is an annual voluntary exercise that helps organisations across Northern Ireland understand how they're performing environmentally. It covers areas like energy and water use, waste and recycling, carbon emissions and environmental management practices. While benchmarking against similar organisations is really useful, the most important comparison is often against your own performance over time. The survey helps you see the trends, track your progress year on year and highlight where the gaps are closing or where further action is needed within your company as well. That's why it's such a strong starting point looking at your gap analysis, and that's what today's masterclass is focused on. So I want to point out, as each gap analysis is bespoke to each of your companies, the feedback that you receive will be a bit different. It just depends on how you've answered it. However, I hope that this webinar will help with the most common questions that I'm asked regarding the gap analysis. So first, I want to point out the differences that will be seen between completing a small business survey and a full survey. So when a small business is completing the survey, certain questions are going to be hidden on the survey platform as these are not relevant to a small business. However, so any small businesses, they'll receive a, so to speak, full gap analysis with all the questions of the survey included. However, the answers that are hidden when they're completing the survey will be in grey in their gap analysis. So this is just to allow the small businesses to see what the full survey asks. And if they feel that these questions can be relevant to them and they want to complete a full survey next year, you absolutely can. Just because you're classed as a small business, it's not mandatory to complete the small business survey and you can complete a full survey should you wish. So the remaining slides that I'm going to go through now is relatable to both small and large companies completing the survey. So on the first page of your gap analysis, it all looks the same for everyone. You'll find your score and breakdown by section. Your score will be, at on the first row. So if we're looking here on the screen, we've used Business and Community as the name, and you'll see your score and the breakup is on the top row. The bottom row then shows the maximum marks available. So for corporate strategy, which is questions 1 to 3 in the survey, it has a maximum mark of 18%. Environmental management, which is your questions 4 to 10, has a maximum score of 10%. And I'm going to explain this a little bit further in a moment. And the final largest section of the survey, environmental performance and improvement, has a maximum score of 72%. You can see there's a row for bonus marks as well. So this is related to the Bring a Business initiative, where you can score up to a further 3 additional points on top of your score. And that might help you get that final push over to the next band and level. Finally, the final row displays which level you have achieved this year in the survey. So that's under the banding. So where it says your banding, that's what you've achieved this year. You can see on the right here, the banding levels. So to achieve green, it's not to 40%. To achieve bronze, 41 to 59. Silver comes in at 60 to 79. Sorry, there's a wee error there. The next is gold, it's 80 to 89. And then platinum is 91% and above. And then also just at the very bottom there, this year we've added in another additional row at the bottom of the scoring table, and that tells you where you've placed in your sector. So you'll be able to see on that front page of your gap analysis where you've placed within your sector. So we're looking at the layout now. So for each scored question in the survey, you'll be able to see the questions asked in the survey in bold. So you'll see what the question is, what is asked. So that is the actual question in the survey. Then below it, directly below it in normal writing, not italic, that is what you've answered in your survey. And then finally at the bottom in italics, you'll see advice on how to improve your score. So this is the layout used throughout the whole gap analysis. So it'll be the question, what you've answered, and then a bespoke advice. So as I mentioned, there are 3 sections within the survey, and I want to bring your attention to section 2. So this section is the one that relates to having an environmental management system or an EMS. So if you have an environmental management system in place that is externally certified to ISO 14001 or an equivalent standard, you will achieve full marks in this section, and you're going to skip to section 3 when you're completing the survey. If you don't have an externally verified EMS in place, there are 6 questions to follow, which allows you to still achieve most of the marks in this section. But please note that if you have achieved full marks in this section, these questions are still going to appear on your gap analysis. They'll be grayed out, but it's just similar to the small business survey. It's just to allow you to be able to see which questions are asked if you had said no. So going to go through some common queries now. As we only have 30 minutes, I'm not going to go through each question of the survey because this would take too long and won't be relevant to everyone, as everyone answers differently. However, I have pulled a few common queries that I find most companies would ask when they receive their gap analysis. So starting question 3A, employee engagement. So this question covers how you engage with your employees in relation to environmental issues. You will achieve full marks if you're carrying out 5 of these actions. Question 3B, customer engagement, and question 3C, supplier engagement, are a bit different, and you must be carrying out all of the actions in order to achieve full marks for these questions. So there's a couple of other questions that work in the same scoring system as question 3A. So we have question 11B, which refers to which scope 3 categories you report on. As there's 15 scope 3 categories, some of these will not be able to be applied to some businesses, and this is purely just due to the nature of your operations. Therefore, to achieve full marks in this question, you must be reporting on at least 5 of the scope 3 categories. Now, I completely understand that scope 3 is a daunting task, and most organizations are either right at the beginning of this journey or haven't started at all, and that's completely normal. And hopefully this question will encourage you to start doing some of these measurements. So I would encourage you to take some steps to start calculating a few of the so-called easier scope 3 categories. Now, I only say this as you most likely already have this information sitting in a spreadsheet somewhere, but you don't realise that this actually counts towards measuring your scope 3 emissions. So this would be the likes of your business travel. This is any travel that your employees have made for work purposes. So this is going to include any mileage claims, flights, ferries, train tickets, taxi receipts, etc. The list goes on. And your finance team is usually the best place to get this information from. And you can calculate your business travel from these. Another, so to speak, easy scope 3 category would be your employee commuting. So this information can be gathered through a simple survey that's sent out to your employees on a yearly basis, and you can just ask for the information to calculate how they travel to and from work and what the distance is. Once you have these 2 aspects covered, then it'd be a great opportunity to collaborate with other teams in your company to look further into your other Scope 3 categories and see what's applicable to your company. You can investigate what information you might already have in respect to these categories and what you might need to start collecting and recording for them. Just remember, when you are looking at Scope 3, it's collaboration is key for greenhouse gas emission recording. So link up with all the different teams. It's not just down to environment. So another example is question 12F, circular economy. As with the Scope 3 question, the same applies for circular economy, as we recognise that not all of the options are going to be applicable to each company. So therefore, in this question, you're required to carry out 5 of these actions in order to achieve full marks for this question. And for all other questions, they're marked based on how developed you are in that particular question. So for example, question 11A, which refers to measuring your greenhouse gas emissions, it's scored incrementally. So achieving 0 points for not measuring any scopes, a higher percentage for measuring scope 1 only or scope 2 only, a higher percentage again for measuring both scope 1 and 2, and then finally full marks for scope 1, 2 and 3. So again, I want to just point out that your gap analysis will have bespoke feedback for each question and how to improve in each question. And that is just depending on what level you're currently sitting at in that question. So question 15. So this is the one that you might recall as the data question. So this question requires you to input your data in order to demonstrate performance improvements over 5 different impact areas. So these are total greenhouse gas emissions, waste generated, percentage of waste diverted from landfill, water, and your chosen additional impact that you'll have selected yourself in question 13. So your gap analysis will display this information as seen on the screen. So I've tried to put it up so that you can see all different ranges on the screen. So your improvement is calculated in percentage from baseline year to current year, and is scored incrementally from 0 to 10+%, just depending on what percentage that you can demonstrate. So if you can show 10% or above improvement since the baseline year, you will achieve full marks. If you can't show any improvement of 2.5% or above, you're going to score 0. Your gap analysis will detail the scoring range that you've fallen into, and it'll give you an idea of how much that you need to improve to achieve 10% or more to get those full marks. So just some simple ways to reduce these aspects. They might include, so if we're thinking about greenhouse gas emissions, switching to renewable energy, using renewable electricity such as solar and wind, or if this isn't feasible in your company, look into green tariffs as a first step. These are all going to dramatically reduce your scope 2 emissions, and that will reduce your overall greenhouse gas emissions for this question. You might also consider improving your energy efficiency of your buildings. So you can start out by making small changes, such as, and most of you are already going to have this in place, but switching to LED lighting, using smart thermostats, and upgrading your building's insulation. Reducing the amount of energy that you'll need will also impact your overall greenhouse gas emissions and will cause reductions from your baseline year. If we look at waste generated, most simple way that this can be addressed is by looking at where your waste comes from and tackling it from the source. So use fewer materials for your products, so especially if you're using any raw materials in your companies. Try to design your processes to minimize wastage. So for example, in manufacturing, try to design in such a way that less offcuts or scraps are created. And also try to rethink how you package your products. So I've seen a really great few ways recently on how this is being carried out in all different sectors. So for example, covering less surface area with plastic wrap for transit, or if possible, completely avoiding any wrapping. Pack items in one box rather than separate boxes. And if you're office based, it can be as simple as going paperless or avoiding single-use plastics or products and encouraging reusable cups and water bottles. This will all bring down your waste generated as well. For water, A really easy way to reduce the amount of water that you use is to simply monitor usage regularly. So if you can see an increase from one month to the next, you're going to be able to quickly tell if there's a leak somewhere and you'll be able to rectify this quickly. Reducing the amount of water that's being used or lost. Installing push taps and low flow flushes is a great first step to reduce the amount of water that you use. And also in manufacturing companies, sometimes water usage can be a big heavy part of your process. You can consider installing a water recycling system as well. So all of these, of course, they're subject to what your company actually does. However, it's just a few ideas to get you thinking of how you can start to reduce and improve in each of these impacts. The only impact area that scored different in this question 15 is the percentage of waste diverted from landfill. So you must divert over 50% of your waste from landfill to achieve points. This again is scored incrementally in others, like the others, with 95% or more diverted achieving full marks. So one of the best places to start is by looking at both what happens inside your office and what happens once your waste leaves the building as well. So yes, of course, having your usual recycling and composting bins available is definitely important. And if you don't have them, it's a great start. But it's really worthwhile to check in with your waste contractors because that may let you understand what they're doing with your waste once they receive it. So many contractors are actually already taking great steps. They're sorting materials so everything ends up in the right recycling streams, and in some cases, sending any remaining non-recyclable waste to an energy recovery facility, and that's diverting from landfill. So even small changes combined with choosing the right waste partners can make a big difference to your diversion rate. And you might already, it might already be happening, but you just haven't checked it out yet, so you don't know what's going on after it leaves your building. So it's just something to keep in mind to get your waste diverted up higher. Before we finish, I want to quickly, excuse me, before we finish, I want to quickly highlight one of the areas that many companies lose easy points for, and that's public reporting. So you'll see a few examples on the screen, and what we often find is that businesses are doing all the right things. They're doing some great things, but they're just not sharing them publicly. So because these questions in the survey, they do require external reporting to show transparency and commitment. And that's why we ask it to see if you're doing that. But you can only receive points if this information is visible outside of your organisation. So if you've selected no for these, it might be worth considering whether you could publish this information. It can be on your website. It can be publicly accessible company records, like some reports, or even on your social media channels is another way to get it out there. Often the work's already happening. It just needs to be communicated outside of your office or company.